Few final questions here. We've got a vote that has just been called, so it's good timing here. Ms. Sayre, you have indicated that you're operating on Forest Service land. I detected a fair amount of frustration in saying that if it was a different Forest Service, you might be subject to different interpretation or different issues that might be presented. Explain to me, it seems that almost without exception, we have issues that are brought before this committee, and whether it is mining or whether it is grazing or whether it is harvesting trees, whether it is oil and gas permitting, it seems invariably it is harder and more complicated to do it on federal land. So your comments about what you're dealing with is, again, consistent with everything that we've heard. The fact that we are seeking to access these minerals that have been identified by our own federal government as important, they're critical, they're important for us to have. Does that give you, as a company that is looking to develop on public land, on our Forest Service land, does that give you any advantages? And I'll ask Mr. Gregory the same question. You've noted that beryllium provides significant advantages to the Department of Defense. It's been identified as not only strategic, but also critical. Because it has been designated so, and Department of Defense needs this, are there any advantages? We're going to a lot of trouble to put minerals on a list. But if it's just put on a list and we're still making it just as complicated and difficult to gain access to it in this country, I guess I'm asking a somewhat rhetorical question, is why do we put it on the list? So your comments. And Mr. Sims, you can join us in this discussion.
So my first thoughts would be the advantages for the business model and the investment of attracting investors and help with the business model to have this to be listed on there. It also provides, it's benefited us in a social license aspect with our communities. We have committed citizens of Idaho that want to contribute to supporting the critical minerals, and it's particularly antimony, basically because there is a history. It's surprising to see the grandfathers of the people that still live in the community who used to work at the mine during the war years. So social license, business, investment, those are all real, and that does attract.
Those are both very, very key.
Yes. But what would be the most helpful as the tax reforms have been put into place and how that has been attractive, if we could have the permitting to match that tax reform and those other benefits that have come, we need to get the expertise in the permitting across the board that is efficient and that is consistent. And the rules are there, the regs are there. There's just the interpretations are inconsistent across the board.
Mr. Gregory?
Materion is proud to be a long-term, reliable partner and supplier to both the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy, starting with the Manhattan Project. And we have always supplied in a competitive environment. The area where being a strategic and critical mineral comes into play, though, is both departments frequently issue requests for proposals on ways to improve technology, to reduce cost, to secure supply, and we respond to those requests. It gets us a seat at the table, and our ideas are judged based on merit, and where we have a good idea, maybe we get a hearing that we might have not otherwise. So to me, that is the advantage, is getting a seat at the table when we're looking at improving these resources.
Mr. Sims?
Madam Chair, I think one of the biggest outcomes of this process, besides what may happen with government relation permitting, is just helping Americans understand the extraordinarily large number and complexity of the supply chains that make this iPhone and everything else. I'm still trying to get my 3 kids, Noah, Ella, and Hannah, to understand just how hard it is to make one of these. In the 1960s, it took about 12 elements on the periodic table to make a computer chip, and now it takes more than 60. So helping Americans understand that we need these, and we need more than we used to, will help them, I think, bring to the table more support for developing these minerals, whether they're mined or whether they're recycled, or in cases where we have to import them.
Appreciate that. Dr. Eggert, I asked about the role of the Critical Minerals Institute and all that they do. Your testimony describes the advanced materials and the chemical separation technologies. Are you familiar with the molecular recognition technology that UCOR is looking at? It's an effort to do the rare earth separation. This is up in Alaska. This is something that we've been in discussion with them on for some time. I'm wondering if you're familiar with it and if this is something that CMI is perhaps involved with or reviewing.
I am familiar with, know of the molecular recognition technology that UCOR is developing. It's one of several potentially very revolutionary techniques in terms of rare earth separations, one of the key challenges in rare earths. CMI is aware of this. We are not actively engaged with UCOR, but that certainly is a possibility in the future.
And one of the things that we haven't discussed here this morning, we've been talking about the resources themselves, but our reality is that we're not doing any of the processing. That's all going to China too. That's another level of vulnerability. So when we talk about this full supply chain and what it's really going to mean in terms of vulnerability, if we are able to extract it safely here, good on us. But if the next step is always going to be China for the processing, guess what? We're back in the same opportunity for more strangleholds here. So I put that out there. I know you all think about it, but particularly when we're talking about the role that China plays with these critical minerals, we've got to be thinking about it full stream. The other issue that really didn't come up, I think, Dr. Eggert, you mentioned it somewhat briefly, and maybe Dr. Fortier, in your written testimony, and that is the issue of developing a workforce here. I know that in Alaska we've got great mines, great mining opportunity, but to develop the men and women to go into these these critical industries that supply this whole supply chain. I'm worried about that end of it as well. So it's one thing to have the resource, it's another thing to be able to extract that in an efficient and in a manner that allows for a process that is fair, that is environmentally sound, but you got to have the men and women, and it's more than just the extraction. So I feel like, again, this is yet one more year that we focus on this as an issue. We're shining a spotlight. That's important. I appreciate, again, what the administration has done with the focus, with the executive order. I think that was necessary, but there is so much more that needs to be done, and it takes everybody here. So I see some folks from the mining industry that are part of this discussion. They know that it's more than just about taking it out of the ground. It's how we do it, and making sure that we are attractive from a regulatory perspective, but also from that investment perspective. And Mr. Menzies, I think you mentioned in your written testimony that you felt that that this country was a pretty good place for investment, among one of the world's most attractive destinations for mining investments. I'm sure not hearing that from folks. So that is another aspect of what it is that we need to do to address that. And unfortunately, until you have some regulatory certainty and until you have some clear policies here, it's tough to get investors, because what you do out there is not cheap, it's not easy, and it's not quick. And that social license that you talk about, Ms. Sayre, I think we all recognize that there is a responsibility. We take that very seriously. I know the industry takes it very, very seriously. So all these pieces working together will allow us to move forward. But we're not moving fast enough in my book. And I'm going to continue to sound the alarm, continuing to press on the urgency, because as we saw from that chart that Senator Capito shared with us, that's part of our binders here this morning, our situation is not getting better. It is progressively getting worse. And vulnerability is not a place where I want to be today. So with that, I thank you for your time, and thank you for the expertise that you've shared with the committee. And with that, we stand adjourned.